Hi, this is David with EV World News, where we talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock market. Today, I've got my co-host and editor and founder of EV World, Bill Moore. How's it going today, Bill?
¿Cómo está, amigo?
All right. Well, I'm down in Florida today,
Right.
broadcasting. I'm outside, so I'll have a little bit of background noise, possibly from time
Bunch
to
of
time.
kids out there playing.
Yes, and hopefully they don't. They're pretty close to where the gator was yesterday. So
Now, you should point out that the reason that you're down there is because you are an avid tennis player and competitive old guy in the tennis league.
yeah, I'm down here for a tennis tournament tomorrow. Anyways, it's a USTA national championship, and
Okay.
we'll see where that goes. Anyways,
Okay, good.
So back to our topic of the day, we're going to talk a little about the world's power grids, and we talk about the grids a lot because it's obviously it's a big issue. This is a pretty interesting article here. The world's power grids have 50 million miles worth, need a major overhaul, and without a global makeover, the aging power grids could suffer more blackouts and throw off global climate goals. And this is kind of interesting, and as I'm always saying, people like to see the world burn, so people probably like this article. Anyways, the governments and utilities need to add or replace by 2040 virtually all of the world's power grids. That's pretty crazy. 50 million miles of infrastructure.
Well, look at the U.S. power grid. Basically, it will be a century old by 2040. My dad used to, when he got out of the Army right after World War II, his first job was he lived out in the panhandle of Nebraska, and he would take and do maintenance work on diesel generators on panhandle ranches. And because there was, everybody was independent back then, and he worked on wind turbines and things like that. And eventually, rural electrification got there. But this is like late 1940s. So, the U.S. power grid is going to be over a century old by then. So you could see where there's a need.
Well, there's no question. Today's aging grids are often teetering on the edge of power shortages, something that could become an even bigger problem as homes, buildings, and transportation go all electric. And that's interesting because we always, you hear the big argument against electric cars is can we support them with the existing grid if everybody all of a sudden swapped and charged their cars all at the same time?
Right.
We know that would be a problem at the moment. And so it's interesting to see, and we're going to talk a little bit about how the U.S. is doing something about it in our own
exactly. Coincidentally,
it's just hard to see where some of this might go. The report says investment in power grids have been stagnant globally for more than a decade, needs to double to more than $600 billion a year by the end of the decade. Wow, 600 billion. That's a big number for the whole, but that's for the whole planet. So
yeah, that's for the whole planet. Because let's be honest, you've got what, 2 billion people on the planet that don't have reliable electrical power.
That's true. That's true.
So there, you'd like them to be able to have that luxury. And of course, we've been enjoying a grid that's been around for most of our life, certainly my lifetime. So
I don't know what percentage of the world's population still heats their property with wood, and burning just fires indoors, but it's still pretty considerable. It's way more than people think. It's not in the United States, obviously, or Western Europe, but in other parts of the world, people still burn wood in a lot of homes, and they don't have electricity,
generally charcoal, because they'll get a little better energy efficiency out of buying charcoal and using charcoal. So.
Yeah, but it's still crazy to think about, when we're talking about electrification and the grid and electric cars, and there's people who still don't. There's a lot of people in the world still don't have electricity.
Yeah.
Anyways, our next article is talking about what the U.S. is trying to do about the grid. And the White House announced a $13 billion to modernize the U.S. power grid, which really, in some scheme of things, doesn't necessarily seem like a lot when you see how much they spend on a lot of other things that are going on in the world right now.
Yeah, what's the Pentagon budget? 700 and whatever, 800 billion
Yeah, well,
yearly.
they were talking about giving another 60 billion to Ukraine.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's a little disingenuous about those arguments is that when we give stuff to a country like Ukraine, we're giving them all of our stuff at what we paid for it or where our current replacement cost is for stuff that we've mothballed.
Yeah.
And eventually we're going to dispose of. So it's 60 might be $60 billion worth of stuff, but in reality, we were probably going to scrap it for $2 billion.
It's in a way, it's an inventory clearance situation.
Right. So I'm not sure that that's really completely honest. It's not like we're giving Zelensky cash.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's no question that Ukraine's a corrupt country, but if we're not giving them cash, I don't see where it's.
Yeah. Did you ever watch any of the episodes of the comedy series that the current president Zelensky was the star of?
I've not.
Because that is exactly what they talk about in that series, and I think that's what got him the presidency, because he did a show on the corruption in the Ukrainian government. So there obviously is something that he's been aware of. This was done in the early 2000s, 2010 range, and that's what he was in the series. He's a school teacher who speaks out about the corruption in the government, and some of his students record him talking about that. And then they put it on the internet, and suddenly here's this obscure school teacher who finds himself the president of Ukraine and having to deal with all of the corruption. And that's what it was all about, was the corruption in the Ukrainian government. I mean,
I often say, if you're measuring measuring corruption, and up here is the most corrupt country, and the floor would be no corruption, and the United States is considered to be one of the least corrupt countries. We're probably still right here, and maybe Ukraine's up here, okay? But you still got another 4 feet down to the floor, and so we all know politicians are corrupt. You can't be an ethical president. The most ethical president we probably ever had was probably the least effective president ever, and that was Jimmy Carter. And you just look at the man, and it's like, he really didn't do much wrong as president, but he couldn't get anything done either.
Well, then of course he had to deal with the Iranian hostage deal that we can get into. How Reagan manipulated that whole situation to.
What I'm getting at is, to be a good politician means you have to be unethical and you have to sell your soul to the devil. Kind of thing.
I don't know. I don't think I necessarily agree with you on that. Do they have to compromise to get things done? Certainly. And what could be defined as maybe corruption by one side of the argument could be defined as political reality on the other.
Well, when politicians lie to us, when politicians lie to us, we're told that they misled us.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's just changing the words around. Okay.
What does this have to do with the power grid, though? We better get back on course.
A lot of people think that this is part of it. So it is, I think, fairly relevant. But
the interesting thing about the funding there is that a lot of that funding is going to what is referred to as disadvantaged communities. I mean, I actually took part in a what do they call that?
Tribal event?
Focus group down in Lincoln, our state capital, looking at how do we provide electric mobility equitably to disadvantaged communities. And that is, of course, we have a fair number of Native American reservation people live here in Nebraska. Nebraska is actually one of the leading Midwestern states for taking in refugees. We have a fair Ukrainian community here, Iraqi and Afghanistan, communities here that we've taken them in as refugees. And they've left everything. They come over here, they can't even get a driver's license, and that's changed and things. So, a fair amount of this money is going to how do we provide electricity to our own disadvantaged communities, as well as I think there's actually a couple of programs that actually involve Nebraska is involved in. We need we've got all this wind resource. How do we get that to where that wind power is needed? And things of that nature. So there's a problem we need to handle, and it would appear that this is the first tranche in addressing that problem.
Well, we had a question in the chat from Yogesh asking what is the most corrupted country.
Ooh, wow.
And I think most people probably consider it probably to be Russia. And part of it is it's just really hard to fathom how bad their military is.
Should I look it up? I'm sure Google has a ranking. Let me just see.
It probably does.
Which is most corrupt country?
It'll probably say the United States.
Oh, no, not even close. Not even close. We have our problems, most certainly. Let's see. This is U.S. News and World Report. 10 most corrupt, which they list here is the first one. Second year in a row, Russia. You're right. Russia tops, followed by Lebanon. Let's see, who else? Bangladesh, Belarus, Russian influenced country, Myanmar, or the old Burma, El Salvador, Zimbabwe, Mexico, Colombia, and so on and so on, Iran. So that's
this will be the most watched part of the video.
Pardon?
This will be the most rewatched part of the video.
Exactly. Thankfully, the top 10 or so is not the United States. So
yes, that's pretty good. But it's interesting that $2.3 billion to help states and tribes reduce impacts due to extreme weather and natural disasters. Was part of that. It makes for interesting news. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about Tesla's earning reports from yesterday. Now,
that and the fact that they finally have given a release date for the Cybertruck now.
Right. Yeah. And so Tesla dropped 8% this morning. A huge drop after EV maker missed on both top and bottom lines. Company did reveal the Cybertrucks are on track for delivery starting on November 30th. And a lot of people have been seeing them out and about. So they're popping up in different places, even though they haven't technically been released. So there's lots of
well, that's to be expected. I mean, I've driven those, that type of car. It's just an early production prototype, so that's what we're seeing there. Those aren't vehicles that are going to be officially delivered to customers.
Tesla's income did climb 13% from a year ago, but they were expected to hit 24 billion, and they fell a little short at 23.4 billion. I mean, that's 600 million short in revenue.
Yeah.
Isn't really, what is that? It's about 2% less than what they were expected.
Yeah. So it's not a catastrophe,
No.
The company is not falling apart by any means.
They had a 66 cents per share earnings versus 74 cents expected. Their net income was 2.3 billion versus 2.56 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, those are,
most of the analysts that I was looking at were saying that you can basically lay this at the feet of the price cuts What is it? The average I think you did an episode on this is what 14, $15,000 off what the prices used to be.
Yeah, so this was across all EV sales in the United States from 2022 to a year later. The average price was down over $14,000.
I think I saw a number of 24,000. Or was that may have been all models, gas, electric, and so on.
Then that may have been the case, but it is interesting to see how much that's changed. That's certainly been a big change.
Well, yeah, and part of this too. I guess I should have. One thing we might want to touch on briefly is the fact that Ford and GM and Volkswagen are scaling back their initial start plans to begin, building EV factories and expanding their current EV factories because of, what's described as falling demand. So that may also be factoring into some of this as well.
Well, it could be.
Yeah, GM I think they postponed their plans for their EV factory for till I think 2025 now, at least a year.
Well, the strike stuff isn't helping them out any.
No, and that only complicates matters. Yeah.
I'm really worried about the big three. I really just don't see how they weather some of the storm. And as I've dug deeper into about a week or so, we were talking about the adoption rates in Nordic countries. And a big part of it is they have such high tariffs when you import a vehicle for sale in those countries. What they've done is they've eliminated most of them for EVs. And so they made it so where buying a gas powered car is so much more expensive than buying an EV that everybody's just gone ahead and swapped. And they put in infrastructure. But those countries also have, some of those countries, the population is a little more than double Nebraska. They're not really a whole lot bigger population wise than what Nebraska is. And
that's not saying much. You could take all of Nebraska and fit it into a corner of an LA suburb.
Yeah.
Or a borough in New York. So.
Right. It's just not a big population. As one of my friends said, there's more Swedish people living in the United States than live in Sweden.
Up in Minnesota, yeah.
Oh, that was really funny too, because I heard him try to say Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota. Yeah.
Yeah, and I never realized that was the Swedish accent, why everybody spoke that way.
Yeah.
And when I spent time up there. But anyways, that's all we had for today. And
there's lots more, but we just can't cover it all here because just since 6:30 this morning, I've posted 140 new stories, and I probably got another 60 or 70 to go. Within the last 24 hours. So
that's pretty amazing.
So there's lots of material out there, and if you're not following our RSS stream, please do so. A great way if you're a glutton for EV news, that's the best place to start your journey because we try to collect it all and put it in one place for you.
All right. Well, Bill, as always. Appreciate you having me on.
Much success on the tournament, old man.
Oh, thank you.
Don't break a leg.